Welcome to this explainer, where we're diving right into the incredible evolution of the Apollo Theater. We're going to explore how one single building on 125th Street in New York City became Harlem's heartbeat and really the undisputed soul of American culture. Plus, we'll look at why it now sits at the very center of a super complex modern fight for historic preservation. All right, let's just jump right in.
To truly wrap your head around the monumental scale of this venue's fame, you have to hear this legendary claim from former owner Robert Schiffman. It perfectly captures a place so globally iconic, so deeply embedded in our cultural DNA, that it barely even needed an address. Literally, you could write Apollo Theater on a postcard, drop it in a mailbox anywhere, and it would just be delivered. Now that is serious fame.
Section 1. Segregated Origins to Black Mecca.
The transformation of this theater is honestly wild. Back in 1914, it opened up as Hertig and Siemens' new burlesque theater. And get this, in a neighborhood experiencing the massive demographic shift of the Great Migration, this venue was completely segregated. African Americans were absolutely barred from sitting in the audience or performing on stage. It wasn't until a 1933 campaign against burlesque, led by future Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, that the doors were forced shut. But then, in 1934, Sidney Cohen and Morris Sussman reopened it as the 125th Street Apollo Theater. They completely flipped the script, embracing variety reviews and marketing directly to Harlem's rapidly growing black community.
Section 2. The Golden Age of Vaudeville.
Once those doors opened to absolutely everyone, the Apollo didn't just survive, it took off like a rocket. That exact year, 1934, marked the launch of something truly legendary, Amateur Night at the Apollo. This is a 90-year tradition that started out as just a simple Wednesday night contest, and it went on to birth some of the most influential careers in music history. It was the ultimate proving ground, a place where talent was discovered by scouts, and where a notoriously critical but super energetic audience literally decided your fate.
Just look at this staggering roster of alumni. It's basically a who's who of music royalty. Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, James Brown, Sammy Davis Jr., Sarah Vaughan, Luther Vandross, Lauryn Hill. I mean, Ella Fitzgerald actually won that amateur night contest, and James Brown recorded his smash hit 1962 live album right on this very stage. Seeing these names, it is crystal clear why the Apollo is credited with playing such a massive role in the emergence of jazz, swing, R&B, and soul.
Section 3. The Heartbeat of Harlem, a stage for progress.
But we have to look beyond the music, because the Apollo was never just an entertainment venue. It was a vital community anchor. During the 1950s and 60s, it served as a crucial safe space for black expression and political mobilization. Civil rights giants like Martin Luther King Jr. and Bayard Rustin actually used this very stage to deliver speeches and hold meetings. It offered a platform for progress when activists and performers were facing almost impossible obstacles everywhere else.
Section 4. Historic Preservation, the Ongoing Battle. Now let's zoom out to a really relevant issue today. As neighborhoods rapidly change, how do we protect crucial cultural landmarks? The debate around preservation laws is incredibly complex, and there are very valid points on both sides of the aisle here. Proponents argue that we absolutely have to protect our history, our cultural anchors, and the architectural integrity of our neighborhoods. But on the flip side, opponents point out that strict preservation can sometimes freeze a neighborhood in time. They argue it can prevent necessary progress, obstruct positive changes like energy-efficient upgrades, and stall real estate development. So, it's a really delicate balance.
And this dynamic becomes incredibly urgent when we talk about gentrification. In Harlem, this isn't just some theoretical debate in a classroom, it is a daily reality. Development has heavily ramped up since the early 2000s, and it's threatening to sweep away the physical history of the area. Grassroots organizations know that preservation laws alone won't completely stop gentrification, but they see it as an absolute must-have tool to make sure a community's core essence isn't just entirely wiped off the map.
Of course, the emotional desire to save a building immediately runs into some hard facts. Survey data from historic preservation professionals reveals the real roadblocks. The top hurdle, funding, sitting at 24%. Right behind it, at 21%, is the challenge of proving and communicating a site's ongoing cultural relevancy. What's really interesting here is that new development is actually cited less often, at just 8%, than simply figuring out how to pay for the preservation and prove its worth. And then there's the sheer bureaucracy of getting a building preserved, which is a whole other headache. We can definitely appreciate the tasteful humor in this New Yorker cartoon about over-preserving things, like the National Trust for Historic Preservation of Frank's Chair. It playfully pokes fun at the idea of freezing every single little thing in time. But jokes aside, when we look at Harlem,
The actual stakes for cultural survival are sky high, and the lack of preservation is genuinely striking.
To put that into perspective, the numbers are just stark. Only 3.7% of Harlem's buildings are legally protected as landmarks. Compare that to a massive 66% of Greenwich Village. It's a huge disparity. And that's exactly why advocacy groups like Save Harlem Now and philanthropic giants like the Ford Foundation are urgently mobilizing. They are securing grants and making unprecedented investments to protect critical community anchors, like the Apollo from the incoming tidal wave of development.
Section 5. Expanding for the Future, the Apollo's Roadmap.
So how exactly is the Apollo surviving these modern pressures? Well, they aren't just sitting still. The theater has built a really distinct roadmap for survival. Step 1 was securing state and city landmark status way back in 1983. Then, in 1992, they transitioned into a nonprofit foundation to manage and fund the programming. But they didn't stop there. In 2024, the Apollo did something totally historic. It physically expanded for the very first time, opening brand new stages at the nearby Victoria Theater. And right now, they're undergoing a massive full-scale renovation of the historic 1914 building. They're upgrading the lobby, seating, and backstage areas, all while carefully protecting that famous, irreplaceable backstage wall holding decades of artist signatures. By actively adapting, the Apollo proves it's not just a relic of the past, it's a living, breathing institution.
Which brings us to the core of this explainer. As cities evolve and neighborhoods inevitably change, how do we ensure the heartbeat of a community doesn't just fade away? Take a second to think about the spaces in your own community that shape your identity and culture. What does it actually take in funding, advocacy, and sheer willpower to keep their history alive for the next generation? It's a massive challenge for sure, but as the Apollo shows us, fighting to keep a community's heartbeat alive is absolutely a fight worth having.